So doing the standard list of checks, feet in the correct position, hip width apart, pointing forward as much as possible. Weight a little bit forwards in your feet so you can get that very slight sense of just dropping back. It's not a big bend. You can see, they say it's like having a little ball tucked in behind your knee, and another one in your ankle, and another one in your hip there on each side, of course. So sitting into your legs and turning in the center of your body. We very easily just do this with no movement in the center of the body. So focus on this idea of pulling your arms around. My first teacher used to say, imagine doing this with heavy shopping bags in each hand. So, you know, there's this sense of weight, and we often don't appreciate the true weight of our arms. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Just let the pace, the range of the movement build gradually and slowly. And then raising your arms. So here, your hands are no higher than shoulder height, maybe lower, but your elbow is definitely lower than your hand. It's almost like if you were still, you could imagine your hands being sort of suspended in loops from the ceiling, and just a little bit wider, a bit broader, really across your back. Your hands should be slightly in front of your shoulders, so when you turn, they stay in that position to begin with. At least you'll start to feel a bit of a pull here, and be careful with that, because if you're paying attention, you'll notice that on your back and your shoulder blades there's a bit of pressure when that happens. But if you're comfortable with this, then what you can do, this is a variation, is you get to here, but you can actually allow the arm to swing further back. But just be careful with this. Don't feel you have to do this. But this opens up this area in sort of between chest and shoulder a little bit when you do that. But if there's any sense that it's not good on your back and your shoulder blades, then go back to the original way of doing this. And just letting your hands drop down. Give yourself a few moments standing in this posture. The dimensions, or rather the alignments that you're looking for, are going to be knees over the balls of your feet, which means that when you sink your hips back, there's a little bit of leeway there. So if they do go forwards a little bit, then it shouldn't be a problem. If you're any further forwards than this, in this higher stance, then as soon as you go to bend your knees, that's tricky. The hips drop back, so hips are roughly in line with your ankles, and you can see from here my arm is hanging down. A bit closer again, and really what I'm looking for is my middle ring or little finger pointing down towards my ankle. if it's the shoulder, if it's the thumb, you can see I'm pulling the shoulders back a bit, and that's pushing the chest out. If it's any further forward than that, there's this kind of hunched feeling. And we're sometimes told that our chest should have a concave feel. Now, it's true. It's almost like your sternum, the breastbone, has really softened. But the problem with that actual phrasing is we quite often imagine ourselves doing this. And of course, we don't want to do that. A lot of these ideas, a lot of these sort of suggestions are corrected. So if you can imagine, a lot of people would stand like this and think this is normal. You tell them to have a concave feeling in their chest, they'll go from this to this. But it doesn't mean this, if you see what I mean. So it's tricky with all of these things. You have to understand the context that they come from. And some of these ideas go back to a very different culture and a very different time. But essentially, we sit into the hips, we get this feeling of our center of gravity dropping. I think I mentioned the other week that when you draw your chin in, that raises the occipital ridge at the back of the skull, so we get this nice open feeling. One of my teachers, I think it's quite a nice description, describes the rib cage hanging from our spine, like a bell hanging from the spine. It's got this sort of slight bell shape, hasn't it? So the front of your body generally hangs from the back, there, straining. So things like your breathing start to come more smoothly, more freely. Without you having to force it. Letting your hips drop back a little bit more. Just going down. Be careful with this. You don't want to do this for a start, because that's going to strain your knees. And you don't want to go down to a point where it's like beginning to bite in your knees. You can expect the thigh muscles to be working. And then just pushing up. So I talked earlier, middle ring or little finger pointing down towards my back. I generally find it's my middle finger. Now that's going to change a little bit, obviously, as I sink back. But if you look at the shoulder, line myself up, I'm not, for instance, doing this or this. So with the down and up movement, with all the movement, really, you can only move as far as your legs are comfortable moving. And that's important, that we don't try and overdo the movement in the upper part of our body to try and make the movement look better. It doesn't look better anyway, if you know anything about Tai Chi. But what will often happen, especially when we bring our arms in into the rooms, I see people doing this because they're going for big movements. But the emphasis should be on smaller movements and comfortable movements. If you think about it, if you ride a bike, or even a lot of people riding scooters these days, you can only move as far as the bike or the scooter will take you. I'm sure we can all work out what happens if the bike hits a brick in the road, the classic kind of image, and stops suddenly, and you carry on. We all know what happens. You come off the bike and go flying. And in the same way, we don't want the upper part of our body to overtake what's happening in hips, legs, feet, either in the vertical movements or when we get to the weight change. So we want to be really clear about how the movement in the upper part of our body feels. One way of doing this, again, as I said the other day about the hand form, you can judge that just by placing the palm of your hand on your kneecap. And that gives you that kind of feeling. You see my fingers are almost straight, so that's how you want to hold them. Spread out a little bit. And as you sink down, imagine you're pushing your fingers down into soft mud. And as you push up, imagine pulling them out of the mud, or some kind of resistance. You could imagine there's a big ball there, and you're just pushing down there. and then somehow your fingers are held, so you've got to pull them up. Or whatever image works for you. The point is that you'll get this slight feeling of a compression through your arm as you sink down, and a slight feel of extension in your arm. And if you pay attention, you'll start to feel that going up into your shoulder, and maybe down through your back and your spine as well. So this can give you an idea of something happening in the upper part of your body without you actually doing anything other than what you're already doing. You're not doing anything extra physically. You're just bringing that imagery in to the movement, feeling a change, feeling an expansion, a contraction, a lengthening, a compression, however you interpret it. So you've got the movement, the energy there, however you, again, whatever label you care to put on it, bringing your hands around as though you're cradling the ball, and then pushing up and just using your arms to give a shape to that movement. So if we look at how much my arms are actually moving independently, they're going to a point right about here, in line with my collarbone and down, roughly in line with my navel, maybe a little bit more or less. The main movement here, you should be thinking in terms of your elbows as your body expands, getting pushed sideways. Imagine your body's like a ball. As you push up and you get the expansion, then this is going to happen. If your had your arms wrapped around the ball, then they would get pushed up, and that should be enough to bring your hands up the required amount and to enable you to keep that feeling of connection in your body. So generally speaking, go for smaller movements, particularly in your arms, at least to begin with, to give you the correct sort of feeling in the movement. And if you want to increase the range of your movement, which is a reasonable thing to want to do, of course, make sure that you do so maintaining that feeling. And then changing. Again, if you look at the range of movement with my arms and hands, roughly speaking, shoulder height and then hip height. No one's coming around with a ruler to measure this, but if I'm here, I push up. Now what's going to happen here is my elbows drop down. So it's this movement rather than this or this that makes it look as though the hands move up. And again, from here, it's this. So here, yeah, my hand's going slightly above shoulder height, but perhaps a better way of thinking of it is my elbow doesn't go above shoulder height. And it's like if you get a, I can't see anything, if you get a scarf or a cloth or something like that, if I were to get a scarf like this and whip it out, it would do that. It was I would do that, and at the end, I don't know if you can see that. I'm moving here. I'm not trying to move the scarf by moving this. I'm pulling the scarf through and then coming back. So that's quite common in Tai Chi and Qigong for the arms following the body. And then parting the clouds. So these first few movements, I think it's quite straightforward to really feel those connections to our body. We don't have to work too hard to feel the chain of the movement, progression of the movement through our body. And so we get used to the inner feeling of that movement. Some of the movements is going to be harder. I suppose with this one as well, if you look, exaggerate, I get to hear my elbows drop down. You see how that, so it works like a crank. That swings my arms up rather than thinking I've got to lift my hands. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky, same idea. One of the real advantages of this, and it's very significant, I think, is that we keep the connections all the way through our body. And with a movement like this, I remember somebody saying to me once that she no longer used to hang her washing on the line because when she reached up like this, she felt unstable, which is not at all uncommon. In fact, it happens to everybody. If you reach up to get something off the shelf, you can feel a bit wobbly, can't you? But when we work this way and we get that feeling of our arm being moved by our body, it's more likely that we're going to maintain this connection right the way down to the ground and not actually overextend, but able to expand. And so a very practical outcome of this is that you can carry on hanging your washing on the line without the fear of falling over, perhaps. This is quite a difficult aspect of Tai Chi and Qigong. They're internal arts. So we start off by copying the choreography of the movement, and inevitably that means seeing mostly our arms. And depending on who's out in front of the class, it's very easy to be misled and think it's all about the arms moving. Do one more of these. So we focus on the smaller movements and gradually build up the bigger movements. So now hands to your sides, pushing in 4 directions. So the same connections are working for you within the body, with the addition that with this one, of course, we add a turn in movement, but they're not as direct mechanically, they're not as obvious mechanically. So you're more reliant here on the feeling in the movement. Does it still feel like you were doing before? Those sense of connections. Can you feel your hips dropping back? That response in your legs, that push up. The expansion working from the middle of your body. Pushing upwards and outwards whilst your hips drop back. The dropping back in your hips is continuous. And the same feeling of your arms being moved by what's happening in the rest of your body rather than leading the rest of your body. So although we haven't got the same idea here that our elbows are, if you like, leading our arms, what you might want to think here is that your elbows are actually pushing your arms now, and the expansion in your body is pushing your elbows. It really is a very difficult thing to get a grasp on with Tai Chi, I think. We're told it regularly, and yet we still lose that quality. So there's a very distinctive quality that goes beyond the idea of simply a flow. It's not enough in the end to make your arms flow. So that's nice. You have to think that your arms will flow because of what's happening in the rest of your body. Just like when you're on a bike, your body moves along because you're pedaling and because the bike is carrying you. So circling palms here, it's you focus on the expansion in one side of your body, pushing your arm out. Don't even think about swinging your hand up. It's quite difficult to move your hand away from your body without it going up. If I wanted to do that around about here, I'm kind of straining to keep my hand down. So it's a very natural movement, a swing up, and my elbow is just a little bit curved, and that gives me the shape. It's a much softer way of doing this, a much more stable way of doing this. So you may find, if you think of it in those terms, that the turning, if you do it, comes more easily. So if it's comfortable, you turn. I find when I think of it correctly, I turn much more. If I'm trying to sort of like strain in my arm, as I'm doing now, I can turn to about here, but already I can feel the tightness in my back. But if I focus on that internal feeling of the body expanding, keeping my hips sinking down, I can turn as far as this, and it's quite comfortable. So then change to the other side. This is perhaps what's behind a saying often associated with Tai Chi, that more is less and less is more. The less I try to move my arm, ultimately, the more movement I get through the whole of my body. So our view encompasses the whole of the inner landscape of our body. And this, of course, obviously brings us back to this aspect of training the mind, the meditational element of Tai Chi, adding the turn if it's comfortable. It's almost impossible, I suspect, for anybody, certainly for me, to maintain that focus of attention the whole time. What isn't beyond us is to just have in our subconscious an awareness of how the movement feels. And it always has this very distinctive feeling in the movement. And when that's lost, when we don't have that feeling anymore, we've lost the connections. Now, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, hips going back, remember? So you're not leaning forward, you're tilting on your hips. Carefully, very carefully as you come up. Should be no feeling of tightening or pulling in your back or your neck or your shoulders. Certainly don't pull your head back. Just be aware also that because of that, it's very strong in our legs. So exercise to really take care with. And then polishing the table, turning first, push your hips back very carefully again. as you swing around, that you're not twisting in your back or your spine. There, I'm swinging it. It's like a dog swinging its tail. One more on each side. Good. And then just come back to standing and see how this standing posture feels after what, sort of 25 minutes of or 20 minutes of movement. So our awareness guides our body, but our body helps to focus our awareness, and it reminds us we lose the feeling of the movement. We have to practice to develop and maintain that awareness. Just like if you, it's almost like wearing a pair of shoes. Sometimes you can just put your foot in the shoe, and you know instantly that you got it on the wrong foot. But if it's a really old pair of shoes that you haven't worn for 10 years, then you might not realize at first because you're not familiar with the shape of them. One of my martial arts teachers always says it's not practice that makes perfect, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. I think I'm not sure I entirely agree. I think we're allowed to make mistakes, but what we're doing is making the mistakes. Really, one of the fundamental things is that we're building that awareness, and this internal aspect of Tai Chi really is the heart of the practice. We're not only concerned with what's happening within the body, but it's from here that we look out, if you like to think of it like that. So that initial set of exercises takes us through a number of different movements and a number of different planes of movements. But there's always very, very practical outcomes to this. As I said, if you get this movement right, if you're not overextending your arms, and people do this all the time, and I see even quite experienced people kind of doing this, and I can feel this sort of like chewing up my back, and it's also not you know, it's a bit wobbly. So we want to build the movements up, but we want to build them up slowly, like building a wall. So each row of bricks at a time. So we're going to do the exercise bear play. Now just moving your weight from side to side. This is a classic movement where it's very easy to get it wrong. So in the first instance, if you look at my weight moving, it's not moving very far. In fact, I think I probably need to come forwards a bit. So there, I'm moving to 60% in each leg. If I move to 70%, I can feel this leg tightening up, and this is happening. So it's a very fine balance. Imagine making a cake and using a set of scales in the kitchen, and you know, you kind of like, you have to sort of get a spoon and spoon out some of the flour or something like that if you've gone over. It's that kind of operation. I'll show you with the pole. If when I'm standing here, this represents my center line. Again, I'm going to come closer. You see where it is there? It's a bit, yeah, that will do. When I move across, can you see where it gets to? It doesn't go to there, because now I'm falling over. It goes from here to here. 60%. It's not a big movement. But bear play itself does actually allow a certain freedom of movement. Just build it up slowly. Everybody in the class knows this one. you push up and you sink down. So that adds another dynamic to the movement. Just be careful you're not out here. You might even want to do, as I generally do, take a slightly wider stance. That gives me a bit more freedom. Pushing up. When we push up, don't lock your knees back, by the way. And then as I push into my left, the leg on your right, see how my hip swings forward and on this side. So from the side, you see it looks like this. I'm exaggerating a little bit. So already with this, you're starting to get that kind of nice fluid movement. If I put my hand on my hip, you'll see that my hand is moving in a bit of a circle. You can do this. You can put your hand on your hip, and you'll see that my shoulder is also doing that. And what I want to do is just let my shoulder move a little bit extra. So as I come over, the side of my body expands in a similar way to Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So the movement builds. I feel that rotation within my shoulder, and I have both hands on my hips. You see, my elbows are now making a circle. So I've already got most of the movement there, going from the side. You see my elbow. All I need to do now is turn my hand palm down and let my elbow push the hand down. And I have bear play. So we've got that lovely movement now. And it is quite a big movement. This swinging of the hips is a little bit kind of more broad than we would often find in certainly the pure Tai Chi movements. But we're not out here. One rule of thumb you could use is that at any point in this exercise, you could just stop and it would feel comfortable. So I can go to here and it's fine. But if I go out here and I stop, I fall over. So if there's any urge to come back quickly from, you get to here, oh, I've got to come back, it's an indication that you've gone too far. It's difficult. So the idea of recognizing those moments when you freeze up and you stiffen up, or maybe even pull back a bit. These are common reactions. These are automatic reactions on the part of our body. If you were walking along the road and you walked along and you put your foot on a paving slab that started to sink, you go, oh, you'll do that. You'll kind of jerk back a little bit. So it's a useful response, but it's not one that we should be getting at all in Tai Chi. So again, the thing about the attention that we pay to the body guides us in the physical movements, helps to keep us safe in the physical movements. So we start to find a different strategy, a different way of approaching the idea of extending our range of movement, which doesn't involve pushing hard. Now from here, Just changing into the circling arms exercise. Very similar. You're not coming up and down anymore. So in a way, this is a preliminary exercise to the one we know as repulsing the monkey. Sometimes I do this without the weight moving, but because our weight is already moving, you can keep your weight moving. Again, we have that circular nature in the movement. The natural unit of movement for your arm is a circle. When we were doing bear play, the emphasis on the movement, I suppose the focal point for the movement in a sense would have been that downward movement, because remember we were coming up and down in our hips anyway. Here, the focal point for the movement is going to be straight ahead. As you come back here, and I'm going to exaggerate slightly, and you see where my hands are here in the middle, they're facing each other. Some people imagine there's a ball between their hands at this point. I don't go quite that far, but you want to feel that connection. They pass each other by halfway through the movement. And if you're aware of that, that hopefully will stop you making one of the classic errors with this, which is that this hand comes down and then you think, oh, hold on, it becomes like swimming. That's a shift in your focus from lower body to upper body. As you turn into your right leg, your hip moves, your shoulder moves to the right, that pushes your elbow pushes your hand. You move across, you turn, now your right shoulder is coming back, pulling your elbow back, pulling your wrist back, pulling your fingers back, and of course the opposite way around. Another feature of this, and it's quite an interesting one, it's a nice one actually, is that because of the positioning of the arms and the way that we're moving, here is a nice open stance of the chest. So this is an exercise sometimes connected with chest and lungs. That can be quite difficult to feel, I think. Depends on how much you're able to move from the center of your body. So you can see the significance of really paying attention to correct movement the whole time. Well, how can this be an exercise for chest and lungs? It's here that we feel that. This is the openness. It's not very different to the wild goose, is it, at that point? Or wind blows the willows. Okay, and then just relax for a moment. So the transition from bear play to circling arms is a very interesting one and a very typical one in Tai Chi. Tai Chi is a form of Qigong, a style of Qigong, if you like. Qigong is an umbrella term, and bear play has this like other Qigong movements, like stretching between heaven and earth and so on and so forth, does actually push at those boundaries of the movement a lot more than Tai Chi, because Tai Chi Chuan has the martial aspect. And yet somehow what we want to do is to take this lovely movement of bear play, this big fluid movement, and put it into a smaller package. And that gives a great deal more power, a great deal more internal strength to the whole process. So once again, paying attention and being aware of the movement in the body and getting the movement correct is the thing that really moves us on in Tai Chi. That's not to say there isn't a physical aspect to this, but on its own, it won't help us to progress. So now have one foot forwards, transferring your weight forwards and backwards. We can see here perhaps more easily how the transfer of the weight is important. You know, imagine sitting on a bike, just doing this. But if you did that, you would fall off the bike fairly easily. Feeling the change in your legs as the weight goes in to one leg and one foot, it fills up. So the change is sometimes described as being between full and empty. Get a glass, pour water into it. The first part of the glass where the water really hits might splash a bit off the sides. It's going to be the bottom. So ideally, as you do this, the first place you feel the actual pressure of the weight, not the movement of the weight, but the pressure of the weight, is in the sole of your foot. And raising your toes and your heel. Front foot is slightly turned down. Once again, don't let this interfere with the alignment of your shoulders. It's not this or this. It's a fairly simple movement for the heel to come up, our knee goes forwards, for our toes to come up, our ankle flexes. No more than that, but both of those movements will allow more of the weight to go into one leg until eventually we're able to take the step. And notice my hips, my pelvis remain level here. What I don't want to do is to get to here and then do this. You see what happened there? I'm on one leg here. If I do this, then suddenly I start wobbling around. Same from front to back here. I don't want to do this because I'll start to go. And that's one of the reasons why the step in at this point is actually quite short. If we were walking faster, we could get away with tilting because it takes a while for gravity to take effect. And so by the time it was likely to pull us over, we'd already have moved on from that point. But going slowly is a lot more difficult. And then on the other side, still that feeling, shoulders in line with your hips. And again, you can see my arm hanging down there. Not like this, not like this. Remember, it's a very common habit to help to propel ourselves by leaning, by using our shoulders and our arms. It's a very useful habit, but that's not what we're doing here. We're moving slowly with relatively short steps. Raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. And step through. Change direction. If you haven't done so already. And shake out. Before we go into the upper body exercises with that, once again, think about the scarf. So if I wanted to throw that scarf over there, I could do this a little bit. Well, it's like there, right there, or I could do this. From here, I could go. See how much further the scarf goes when I do this. It'll be quite hard work to kind of get it there. But when I put it through, and this is what your arm should be doing in all of the movements, those same connections. I think fisherman cast a net is a particularly good exercise to actually feel that with. So have your right foot forwards, sink your weight back, pushing forwards, fisherman cast a net. More is less and less is more. We naturally want to move our arms more, so it's not a bad aim to have more movement in our body. But the way we get that is not by trying to get the arms to move, by working on our stance. And some people just habitually take a very short stance here. So the first thing I would say to them is you want the arms to move, and they do this, and then they do this, and then they're wobbling around. Well, it defies common sense. You know, if you're here and you want to move further, surely you should do that first. I mean, if you're going to build an extension on your house, and somebody comes around and says, "Yeah, I can do that. I'll start building the wall." And you said to them, "Well, aren't you going to extend the foundations?" And they said, "No, you don't need that. I'll just build the wall. You'll be fine." You'd think they're a bit dodgy, wouldn't you? Well, I would, because it's not the right way. It's not the right way round. And it's the same in Tai Chi. We build up from the ground. And again, this is difficult because visually, the first thing we're aware of is what our arms are doing. Or what we think our arms are doing, or what we think the teacher's arms are doing. And then pushing wave. And then next time, just move away from your right hand and turn. And here again, we have that opening of the chest. And as we come forwards again, our hands pass quite close to each other, pulsing the monkey. Opening your chest and across your upper back. Remember, anytime you feel that little wobble, it's an indication that you've overextended in the upper part of your body. Now, to be fair, I wouldn't expect any of the people in the class at the moment to feel that wobble. What you might be missing is not a wobble, but a stiffening up. Because you know enough not to have that wobble, but that doesn't mean that your body is not responding to overextending. And then stepping in. So here, I won't be able to do it now, will I? With my arms extended, I should feel very stable. If I extend them a little bit more, that's when that happens. Can you really do that without straining? So you don't tighten up. I mean, don't fall over. Obviously, if it's fall over or tighten up, just note the fact that the tightening up means that somewhere along the line, you've lost the process of the movement, and somewhere along the line, you've lost the focus of your attention. That's an integral part of that process. Good. Okay, so on the other side, fisherman cast a net. Rooted in the feet, transmitted through our legs, controlled through the center of our body, expressed in our arms. And then pushing wave. Notice how my elbows are coming out a bit. I'll exaggerate. It shouldn't really come out that much. So you feel your elbows pushing your wrists, your shoulders pushing your elbows. And for this one, you would expect your hands to be roughly above your front foot. This is a movement taken from the Tai Chi forms. This and the next one's Repulsing the Monkey. And they're martial movements, and Tai Chi is a close range martial art. What that means in practice is you could comfortably get both your hands on your opponent. They're there in front of you. They're not out there somewhere. It's Tai Chi, not Taekwondo. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Taekwondo for those who can do it, but it's not what we do in Tai Chi. Repulsing the monkey. Notice that my hand is straight out from my shoulder. It hasn't come across my body. Notice whether you've been carried away with the enthusiasm to move your arms, and just draw your attention back to your feet. It can be like running down a slope. The sooner you can just draw back, the sooner you can slow down, the more successful you're going to be. Stepping in. and then step through. Change direction if you haven't done so already. And bring your feet down. Good. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Your back. Around your hips. Right on your belly. And the upper part of the chest. And then finally back to the parallel stance. Embrace tiger, return to mountain. So sinking down, pushing up, expanding, and contracting. Expanding and contracting. Round. And stand. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. That was looking very good from where I was standing.